Welcome to Playbook for Performance, the official podcast of Shauna Corden, the Joan of Arc for corporate healing and performance. Join the quest to make work fun again by preparing leadership for engaging workplaces. And now, your host.
Welcome back, everyone. We are talking about navigating change today. And you might think, oh, I've been through change. I get that. I know what I need to do. Well, have you thought about how your change is affecting everyone else on the team, or how the team changes as a unit? That's what we're going to talk about today. So let's get started. So a little bit about change. In general, just remember that to the brain, change equals pain. So it's just as difficult as if you hit your thumb with a hammer. Change is hard. We've got all these wired processes in our brain about how we think about things, how we do things. And when we ask our brain to do something different, it's painful. So we really need to be transparent about what we're trying to do. We need to acknowledge ourselves when we're looking at something this tough. We need to understand that we are developing new neural pathways every time we embark on a new change. Now, I was part of a group that presented the research that was done by the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, and HCI, Human Capital Institute, who collaborated to put together a report on building a coaching culture for change. And the fascinating thing about this is that almost all organizations had struggled. It was really tough. Often they complained about the poor leadership. We didn't know where we were going. We didn't know why we were going there. Communication was poor. They didn't understand the status of what was going on. They weren't given regular updates. They didn't have an opportunity to weigh in. And frankly, most people were burnt out. They had been asked to do so much. Typically, it was a situation of, we've done downsizing, but we didn't get rid of any of the work. So people were doing 2 and 3 people's jobs, and then they were exhausted, and then they were asked to kind of, do a second job to implement the change, because none of the day-to-day work was stopping to accommodate the change. And all of those things were a recipe for failure. So we don't want you to make that same mistake. We want to make sure that you are over communicating in the most simple ways. Here's why we're doing what we're doing. Here's the path. Here's the timeline. Here's how often we're going to communicate with you. We might, speed it up a bit if we think there's a new decision that will affect things. We'll go on a listening tour. We'll get your feedback. When appropriate, we're going to ask you to weigh in on some of the decisions. You might have a vote in some places. And here's the things we're going to do to kind of relieve the pressure on you in terms of your day-to-day work, or we're going to add additional staff or contractors, or we're going to automate some of these things to make life easier for you so that you can make room for this new change. All of that communication really needs to be done well. And oh, by the way, that's leadership. Leadership really articulates the vision and then connects the dots for each individual person in terms of what's expected of them and how their work contributes to that vision. So important. And yet, we forget to do that. I think as leaders, we are so used to the change before we announce it. We have been weighing this decision for months. We've been evaluating the data. We've been seeing what's happening in the marketplace. We have recognized the need to move. And so once we have a strategy, we announce it to the masses and we expect them to get on board. Well, don't forget it took you months to kind of realize this was the path, this is where we were going. And it wasn't easy. You had some sleepless nights if it was a major change. They have to go through that change curve too. So they are still going to have some denial, some anger, some bargaining, all of those things before they're fully on board and accepting the process at hand. So your job as leader is to acknowledge that, have some compassion for what is happening to them, recognize that you went through it, you just went through it 6 months ago or 9 months ago, whenever that decision was made. Do recognize, depending on your team members, they have a particular change intelligence style. So this comes from Dr. Barbara Troutline. Change intelligence, people are wired for change in different ways. Some are very intellectual. They're approaching it with their head. They're looking at how this is all going to happen. They understand it from that perspective. Others look at it from the people perspective. They're very heart-centered. They look at this in terms of how is this going to impact the people and what can we do to accommodate them, and how do we work with their challenges and feelings, etc. And then there's the implementers, those people that work with their hands, that get all of this stuff done. And based on how you're wired, you have a personality type when it comes to change. The key thing is for you to recognize it, learn how to manage yourself so you can manage others, and of course manage teams. And all of that requires adapting in a change intelligence style. So recognize that how your team members approach a given change is going to be different based on their style. And if you want to learn more about taking the change intelligence assessment, the CQ assessment, let me know and I am happy to set you up. So recognize when it's important to involve your team. Are you going to have them help with the nuts and bolts of the design? Are you going to solicit their input since they're the ones that are doing the nitty-gritty tasks each day? If you aren't, why not? And explain to them why not. Provide support to them. Not just moral support like, hey, I recognize this is not very fun right now, but do recognize in 3 months your life is going to be 50% easier than it is today. Things like that. Or how can you pave the way for them? How can you help take things off their plate? How can you help them take good self-care? Because of course they get run down in this process in terms of time off, or making sure people take holiday, that they're getting enough kind of mental breaks. It could be the employee assistance program if you have something like that where they have someone they can talk to about these issues. It could be just that listening tour that we talked about earlier. And finally, leading by example. This whole idea of we're going through change, here's the timeline, here's the communication, and really adhering to that, being accountable to the organization about those changes that are happening. And then, of course, monitoring the progress. Note if you're off on dates, acknowledge it, atone if you need to. Those are all really important things that come with the process of change. So I mentioned earlier the things that can go wrong, that really sideline a project or sink an implementation. Well, the good news is that those 3 major issues that I mentioned before are actually the things that help projects succeed or change succeed as well. Leadership, communication, employee resilience. And this is a good space for me to talk about. Coming up, we are introducing a new employee resilience app. It's all going to be about resilience and strategies to do so. There'll be lessons for people to partake in. And we need beta testers. We would love to get your name, get your number. let us know if you'd like to be a beta tester for the app. You can email us at podcast@shaunacorden.com, and in the subject line, just put in beta tester, and we will contact you as soon as that is available. So, again, leadership, communication, and employee resilience. I think there are millions of books out there on leadership. Obviously, there's a lot that you can draw from. You can certainly rely on the duty that you have in terms of painting the vision, connecting it to the day-to-day work, and then communicating what's there. Those things are crystal clear in terms of timelines, expectations, etc. But employee resilience is a little tougher. Everyone's different. Some people have really good discipline. They have good, what we call hygiene and coaching in terms of sleep, nutrition, stress management, etc. And others don't. Others have very weak boundaries. They don't have good standards. This is where your situation may really struggle if you don't have good employee resilience to help bolster and bring that project or that change across the finish line. So stay tuned. Keep in contact with us. We'd love to have you as a beta tester. So what are some strategies? What's some homework that you can do to help your team when it comes to navigating change? First one, we said clear communication. Come up with a communication plan, including strategies, key messages, channels. Is it going to be a broadcast email that a lot of people ignore? Will it be in-person coffee talks? Are you going to have announcements on Slack, things like that? Have a plan for all of those things and make sure that you cast a wide net, because what people internalize and the level of detail that they need varies by person. So those that are skeptical, that are sort of pushing back against the change, they're going to need a lot more hand-holding than those that are on board, they trust the process, they're ready to go, just give them the to-do list. So have a strategy. Secondly, involvement and engagement. Making sure that where appropriate, seeking input and feedback. Now, if you're not willing to modify your plans, your process, don't insult them by asking for feedback that you never intend to do anything with. You could do this through surveys, workshops, team meetings, simulations. All of those things can be really helpful in terms of getting the workforce excited about the changes that are being made. Support systems. This is everything from training, peer groups, coaching, group coaching, team coaching, having the leaders go through one-on-one coaching. Because again, you know how to do your day job, but your day job plus this new thing could be quite difficult. And then of course, if people have personal issues going on at home, EAP counseling services can be really important, because that one extra piece could be the thing that sends them into burnout or puts them over the edge. And that is not what we want. Then you're down one more person to help with the change. So, leadership training, of course, educating yourself on the change curve, all of these things, the CQ assessment that I talked about earlier, learning how to adapt to change, and working with it. Those are all workshops that are available. So I definitely encourage you to take advantage of that to keep team morale high. And then finally, progress monitoring. How are you going to monitor the change initiative's progress, communicate that progress, all of those things to make necessary adjustments as you go. So next time we're going to be talking about performance management, and the reason that we're tagging on performance management after adapting and dealing with change is because once you've made the change, you had all these expectations to go with it. So think of it as, let's say you lost 20 pounds and you had all of these strategies. You're going to declare to the family you're not going to have treats, you're going to exercise regularly, you're going to have your 10,000 steps per day, you're not going to have seconds. Those were all your strategies to get there. Once you've achieved it, then how are you going to maintain it? Those are different things. And so when it comes to implementing your change, is it performing the way that you had hoped? Does it have the results that you had promised or were promised? And how are you going to keep true to that? What are the measures that you're expecting? What's the maintenance effort? All of those things. So we're going to talk about that next time. So be sure and join us. Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, we love the thumbs up. We love comments. Drop any comments in there. We can get back to you. We would love to address your concerns in an upcoming podcast. If you're listening, please give us a 5-star review. We are always super happy about that. In fact, we send books. We want them to be sincere, of course. But you can get a signed copy of my book when you send a screenshot of that and email it to our podcast at shawnacorden.com. Don't forget, we can help you with this change journey. We do team coaching and workshops, including on the topic of change and the CQ system. So until then, we'll see you next time. Take good care.
Thank you for listening to Playbook for Performance. To learn more about Shauna Corden, her consulting programs and tools, please visit her website at shawnacorden.com and follow us on social media at Shauna Corden.